Morning, this is your Math 6 Tuesday lesson for April 14th. We are on lesson 113, and the title on page 270 is Finding the Unknown. Mrs. Winter had a slide presentation for her 6th grade class. She had a collection of 80 slides showing active volcanoes around the world. 15% of the slides showed shield volcanoes. How many slides were shield volcanoes? So the question they're asking is, what is 15% of 80? So 15% of 80 is actually our problem. 15% of 80. Okay? So in this case, of is going to represent multiplication most times. Not always, but most of the time, of is going to represent multiplication in math. So we're going to change the of to a multiplication sign. I'm going to bring down my 80, and then my 15%, I'm actually going to change that to a decimal or a fraction to be able to use it. And in this case, we're going to change it to a fraction. If you remember, we're going to put it over 100. Okay, so 15 over 100 changes it into a fraction. And then I can do, actually, let's not do it that way. I know that that's the way they're having you do it, but we're just going to do the changing it into a decimal. It's less complicated, and I think you have a higher percentage of getting it correct. So let's change 15% into a decimal. Remember, we start here, we move it over 2 places. So this is my decimal, and now we just have a simple multiplication problem. Okay, so I'm going to do 80 times 0.15. Do I want to put on top or bottom? It doesn't matter. Okay, this is 0. Mark out my ones place. 8 times 5 is 40. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm going to add them together. And then I have 2 behind the decimal, so I do 1, 2 behind the decimal. Do I need to keep these zeros then? No, so my answer is 12. Okay, so 12 what? It's a word problem, so we want to label it 12 slides. Okay? All right, let's do another one. Mrs. Winter had time to show 12 composite volcano slides. This was 75% of the slides. Okay, so basically we're asking 75% of the total number of slides equals 12. Okay, so in this case we have a little bit different. First we were asking what is 15% of 80. This time we're saying 75% of the total number of slides equaled 12. Okay, so let's go ahead and change this to a decimal so we can work with it. Of multiplication sign, n equals 12. Well, 0.75 times n equals 12. So what is the opposite or the fact family of that? Well, 12 divided by 0.75 will give us n. Do you agree with that? Now we have a problem that we can do. 12 divided by 0.75. Now, if you'll remember, when we're dividing by decimals, we have, if there's a decimal over on the here, then we have to move it over 2 spots and make sure that this is just a whole number. And if we move this one 2 spots, then we have to move this one 2 spots. Okay? All right? So now we don't have a decimal over here, but we have a decimal here. Okay? So 75 will go into 120. Looks like just one time. 1 times 5 is 5. 1 times 7 is 7. 10 times 5 is 5. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That gives us 4. That's correct. So let's bring down our 0. Let's see. 7, 45. It's going to be 5 or 6. So 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 7 is 42, 43, 44, 45. Okay? And I get 0. I'm done. I have a whole number with no remainders. So my N equals 16 slides. Okay? All right. So they put those in word problems, but in your work they actually have these set up for you. But if you have trouble when you get to the word problems on this section, make sure you go back and you read these examples because they will probably give you a clue which way you're needing to set those up. Okay? But it comes down to really listening to the problem to hear what it's asking for. Let's do a couple on your practice. Let's do number 1, which is 55% of 80. Okay, it tells you to write a proportion. You do not have to do that. You can if you find that that's an easier way for you to solve it. But for me, I'd rather do the decimal, 0.55 times 80. And you'd multiply those together and solve it from there. Okay, let's look at, and that's how you'll do 1 through 8. Let's look at number 9. Number 9 says, what percent of 80 equals 36? So, what percent of 80 equals 36? So this is my N, but what I want to remember is that I'm going to need to change that into a percent when I get done solving it. So N times 80 equals 36. So this times this equals this. So we can turn this around and do a division problem, can't we? 36 divided by 80 equals N. So 36 divided by 80, which looks funny, right, to have the bigger number here. But remember, what we can do is add a decimal point and a 0 and say, well, how many times can 80 go into 36? Okay, so 8 can go into 36 four times here. So let's try 4. 4 times 0 is 0. 8 times 4 is 32. 0 and 4. So I have 40 left over. I'm going to add another 0, bring it down, and then 8 will go into 45 times. So 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 8 is 40. And let's bring our decimal up. So my answer was 0.45. Well, how do I change this into that percentage? Because it asked me for a percentage. Well, I move my decimal to the right, and I get 45%. Okay, so I hope that helps you get started on those. Let's do numbers 1 through 17 today. So you don't have to go all the way through 20, just 1 through 17.